Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this webinar produced by Business Performance USA. We're honored to have you as our guest today, and we know that you'll gain a great deal from Kent's talk today on relationships. Business Performance USA produces weekly webinars on Tuesday at noon Central to provide business insights on a variety of topics important to business professionals. Business Performance USA is a voluntary association that provides online business information exchange. When you become a member, you can meet people from across the U.S. engaged in business conversations on topics such as we're presenting today. You may become a member at no cost and engage at any time. Just go to businessperformanceusa.org. One of the many benefits is that you will be able to hear on demand all of the webinars we have presented and at a time that's most convenient to you, including today's webinar if you'd like to share it with your coworkers. Now, today we're going to hear from Kent Stroman on digging a well before you need water, how to build genuine relationships. Very interesting topic that he's got teed up for us. I'm Cynthia Stewart. I'm going to be your host. I'm managing partner for Evermore Services, your partner in building tomorrow's businesses today. And your executive presenter is, of course, Mr. Kent Stroman, whom I think many of you may know. We encourage you to post your questions during this hour. All you need to do is look at your dashboard and there's a question area. You can go ahead and post your questions there, and I'll be monitoring those so that I can pass those along to Kent at a good moment. Also, I want to make sure that you know that we do have a handout that Kent has provided. So let me show you these handout. I have sent these out in email, so hopefully you got an email from me. If you did not, and you would like this this handout for today, go ahead and post in the question box your email, and I will go ahead and send that after Kent gets started, so you'll have that for your use. Okay, so let me go ahead and introduce Kent. If you know Kent, you know what a great guy he is. And basically, he's known as America's asking coach. He's a very talented speaker, insightful advisor, effective communicator, and a published author. And I have his book and have read it from the front cover to the back and think it's really great information. Kent's purpose in life is to equip, inspire, and encourage, and he accomplishes this through speaking, teaching, consulting, and executive coaching. And let me make sure that you get to see all this great stuff about him. After a 25-year career in higher education, Kent launched Stroman and Associates, consulting to fundraising, board governance, strategic planning, and leadership development, and he holds numerous credentials, including the Certified Fundraising Executive. I know when I was looking for a speaker a couple of years ago, I was pointed to Kent, and I have gotten to know him over the last few years, and now I know that he is the real deal and quite talented when it comes to conversational fundraising. And wouldn't you know, in 2012, he launched the Institute for Conversational Fundraising with a mission of equipping leaders to dramatically transform their fundraising results. He's a frequent speaker and presenter to regional, national, and international audiences. And we're really, really happy to have him here today. Speaking about this topic, digging a well before you need water, how to build genuine relationships. So, Kent, what I'm going to do is go ahead and pass the presenter over to you. And I have to find you among all these folks that are logged in here. And we'll let you know once we see your screen. Okay, here it comes, and you'll want to unmute, and I will mute, and you can take us forward. Thanks, Kent. We don't hear you yet.
Well, good afternoon, Cynthia.
There you are. I hear you.
And let's see, can you see the screen all right?
I see it perfect.
Excellent. Well, shall we go ahead and get started?
We're ready to go.
Well, I'm pleased to have the opportunity today to talk about a topic that's very near to my heart, and that's building genuine relationships. And as we get started, when you think about the whole idea of digging a well before you need water, the theme clearly is preparation. And I think it's so easy for us to find ourselves oftentimes at a point where we need to have done something yesterday. And there are all kinds of applications that we could make for the theme, and I'll try to connect from time to time back to the idea of digging a well before you need water. But as we get started and thinking about genuine relationships, I just want to raise the question, why are relationships so crucial? Or another way to put it is, why do relationships matter? And I wish we had the opportunity for everybody to dialogue around this question. And even more importantly, I wish I had understood earlier in my life and career how very important and how long-lasting relationships truly are. But let me just share one story, and there are so many that I could share around this topic. And the other thing that I'll mention is that oftentimes we are digging a well, or if you would, planting seeds at times when we're not even aware of it. But the more we can be aware and intentional in building our relationships, the more beneficial we'll find throughout our lives. And so as we begin, I just want to share this first point, and that is everybody needs somebody sometime. And some of you may remember a song that was almost like that. I think it was really Everybody Loves Somebody Sometime. But it's basically the same thought. And we don't know when those needs are going to arise. And so just like digging a well before we need water, it's important that we engage in that process on an ongoing basis very intentionally. So everybody needs somebody sometime. So here's a bit of my story, and I'm just going to share an example. First of all, let me introduce you to my very thin friend, Wayne. And Wayne and I met back in the early 80s. But before the end of that decade, there was a time when Wayne had a need. Wayne was a volunteer with the Chamber of Commerce. And I think he was chairing the membership drive in 1989, and he asked me if I would be a part of that process. I'd never done anything like that before, and I have to tell you, as an accountant and confirmed accountant by every measure, this was way, way, way outside my comfort zone. But Wayne was a friend. He came to me with an opportunity, and for some reason or another, I said yes. And so he asked me to assist him in the membership drive that year, which consisted of making calls on various business owners throughout the community, inviting them to join the Chamber of Commerce in exchange for their membership fee, sharing the benefits that they would receive, and so forth. Well, through that process, eventually, a few years later, I met someone else who became my friend, and his name is Leroy. Leroy and I worked alongside each other in that membership drive, and so it wasn't very many years later that we were asked, Leroy and I were asked, if we would co-chair the chamber membership drive. Again, this is something that I never would have imagined myself doing, and frankly, the only reason that I did it, or that I was asked, was because I had been involved earlier as a volunteer. And so, if you would, back in 1989, unknowingly, I was beginning to dig a well for a time, for a drink of water that would come much, much later. And so we've got Leroy in 1991, and then I'm going to fast forward just a few years later, 1994. I was at a place where I wanted to become more involved in the community, and so I approached Glenn. At that time, Glenn was the chairman of the board of the chamber. And my question when I met with him, he was also a bank president. My question is, Glenn, are there some ways that I could become more involved in our community, perhaps even in serving in some role within the chamber? Well, that was quite an interesting conversation, and I will have to tell you it led someplace that I never imagined. Eventually, as a result of that conversation, I was invited to join the board of directors. Um, as as the years went by, you can see now, 1998, I'm going to introduce another friend, Kelly. Kelly also was and is the president of a financial institution in my community. As a result of serving on the board, eventually I had the opportunity to work shoulder to shoulder with Kelly. Kelly became chairman of that board sometime after Glenn, and even later I followed Kelly as chairman of the board as well. Now, the point in this, again, is that we're talking about digging a well before you need water. What I didn't know in 1998 was that in 2001, I would launch my own business, Stroman and Associates. We provide consulting in fundraising with a specialty in major campaigns. Also do a lot of work in board development and governance and strategic planning. Well, upon the launch of my consulting firm, I had an opportunity. I was invited to submit a proposal to a university to provide campaign counsel for a very large fundraising project that they had in play. Well, guess who was a member of their board? Exactly. It was my friend Kelly, who I had the privilege to work alongside back in 1998. Now, eventually, that university became a client of mine, and the connection took place in 2001. And here's the point that I want to make as you look at this little sketch. The drink of water that needed to take place in 2001 was the result of digging a well over many years of time, going back at least to 1989. And so you can imagine how at that time I was so glad that I didn't wait to dig the well until I needed the water. And so this reminds me now of one of my favorite sources of philosophy. It's country music. And I don't know if we have any country music fans out there, but I love this phrase from a song by Rascal Flatts, and it says, "God blessed the broken road that led me straight to you." And if you think about your life, and as I think about my life, I realize that there aren't very many direct routes from point A to point Z. Oftentimes it's a zigzag, it's a broken road, it's something in our road that most often we wouldn't choose if we had the opportunity. And yet as we follow that road, if we're intentional and strategic, we'll find that the road leads to a very pleasant destination rather than to a dead end or to a sad end. And so let me just offer 7 reasons why it's necessary for us to get in. And I'm going to use this phrase, get in. Oftentimes it's getting into a meeting, getting into a connection with somebody, getting into some kind of a relationship. And there are any number of reasons. I'm going to just share 7, and I would encourage you to add to the list along the way with some examples of your own, and I'll be glancing from time to time at the chat box. So reason number 1, to get a job. Now, one of the things that I didn't envision, didn't fully appreciate when I launched my consulting firm, was that I would have the opportunity on probably a weekly basis to interview for a job. Now, it's not a traditional job interview, but as a consultant, we are often under consideration for that selection process. And so the whole idea of getting in, getting a job, Interestingly enough, before the day is over, I'll be engaged in one of those consultant job interviews in another community. And so, again, I'm thankful that some of the seeds, different seeds that I planted, or some of the different digging that I've done, has provided for a drink of water later on today. So one reason to get in is as it relates to getting a job. Another is to make a sale. And although I'm sure that many of us on the on today's webinar don't consider ourselves to be salesmen in the direct sales sense of the word, and yet we're all involved in the process of selling ideas. And having previously dug a well far before it's time to have a drink of water, we're preparing for a positive result when it comes to making a sale. Number three, finding a referral. It's amazing to me how often we need somebody to connect us to somebody else. So we want to be able to get in. A referral is a good way to do that. Another is obtaining advice. And I wish we had time. In fact, we may do a future topic on the strictly on the topic of advice visits. I didn't realize it, but I began learning about the value of advice visits in the 8th grade, maybe the 9th grade, when I made the mistake of bringing home a bad grade on my report card. Well, one of the, I think it was intended to be punishments, but one of the punishments that I received from my dad actually opened the door for me to have advice visits with people who I was not comfortable having conversations with. So another reason to get in. Number five, simply to meet someone. Have you been in that setting where there was somebody else in the room that you wanted to meet, or someone whose name you heard, and you're asking yourself, how can I connect with that person? So that's another example of getting in. And number six, simply to open doors. Open doors of opportunity, open doors of introduction, open doors of in exploration. And then number seven, put out here, reasons to raise, to get connected is to raise money. And a variety of purposes for which we might raise money. And you'll notice on your handouts, I just put three examples. Donations. And that is a key part of my work, and that's to help charitable organizations receive generous financial contributions. Boy, before that can happen, we've got to get in. Another example of raising money is as it relates to investments. Seeking investments from other businesses, business leaders, or private investors in order to move forward with a new business opportunity. Or you'll notice a third example there, that of a political campaign. And so whatever the cause or the project is, oftentimes we're needing to get in to make a connection for the purpose of raising money. Now, in my work, and again, I'll just connect this to the fundraising realm, but many times I'm working with organizations who have been working along year after year, funding their operations, and now for whatever reason, it's time for a major fundraising campaign. They may be seeking to raise 10 or 20 times their annual budget over a very brief period of time, 1, 2, 3 years. And oftentimes, as we begin exploring that process, we'll start asking, well, who are some prospective funders at that level? And all of a sudden I start hearing comments like, well, we don't know anyone who has that kind of resources. And so I'll ask the question, well, why don't we? And all of a sudden we find out it's that deficit. We need a drink of water, but we haven't dug a well. We've been very busy, productively engaged in other things, but unintentionally neglecting the digging of that well. And so with that, let's raise the next question, and that is, when should I be building relationships? When is the right time to get started? And on your handouts, if you're following along, on page 2, You'll notice the the very profound statement earlier is better. And now I'm going to just pause and take a real quick drink of water. It's better that we get started earlier building relationships. And why is that? Well, first of all, a couple of thoughts I'm going to share. There's no time like the present. Um, Yesterday isn't an alternative for us. That's gone. And tomorrow is too late. So as it relates to building relationships, when do we start? Start now. The second point is that there's nothing to be gained by delay. Somebody says, well, I'll have tomorrow will be a better day for that. We don't know what tomorrow will hold. The thing that we can be assured of is that opportunities will present themselves tomorrow to rely on relationships which either were built yesterday or we will wish that they had been. So there's no time like the present, and there's nothing to be gained by delay. So here's just a thought that I want to share with you. You do know you'll need connections sometime. You don't know when. And so, yes, earlier is better. Now, I have to tell you, I'm really eager to get to the last section, and that is how you can connect with anyone. But in order to fill out that context, just want to make another point at this time, and that is point number 2. Genuine relationships take time. They don't occur overnight. Now, growth in relationships can be sped up, but it mustn't be rushed. When we try to rush the building of relationships, we have a tendency to step on toes, to make avoidable errors, and find ourselves wishing that we had taken more time. So again, earlier is better. There's no time like the present. We want to move with haste, but let's don't rush. I think it's time for another drink of water. So with that, let's move to the question of who. Who should you make strategic connections with? And in a nutshell, I'm going to say leaders. However, don't limit yourself to people that you perceive to be in that top leadership role today. Why? It's all temporary. And so we need to make strategic connections with on many levels. Many times we don't even know where. But let me just give you some ideas. Here are 8 types of leaders with whom you'll want to connect, and to be intentional about it. Social leaders. As you think about your community, your industry, your territory, if you would, ask yourself the question, who are those who are leading in the social realm? Look for ways to connect with them. An example of a social leader. Sometimes we think about society leaders. Who are some of those people that don't have a specific platform in some of the traditional areas, but it's a person that others within the community look to socially? That's an example of a social leader. Number 2, opinion leaders. And these aren't always the same. There are some people in the community whose opinions others look to. Again, ask yourself, make a list of people that you would consider opinion leaders. And I want to just suggest in each of these categories, write down 5 names. 5 names of people that by one definition or another fit your idea of a social leader and an opinion leader. Again, we can look at the community level. We can look inside our own organizations. Who leads the opinions within my company? Who leads opinions in my profession? Et cetera, et cetera. Number 3, thought leaders. Who are those people whose thoughts are leading? Those to whom others look and ask this question: what are you thinking? Jim, what are you thinking? Megan, what are your thoughts? When we find ourselves or others turning to persons with that kind of question, those would be examples of thought leaders. Again, jot down 5 names of people that you consider to be thought leaders in either in your realm of operation or in areas where you don't have connections but you'd like to in the future. And as you do so, we're going to come back and later talk about how. So number 4, type of leaders, business leaders. Sometimes we think of these as captains of industry. And when we talk about community, don't limit yourself to the neighborhood where you live or the industrial park where you work or even the metro area. Who are business leaders with whom you might connect? Again, think statewide, regionally, nationally, and even globally. Business leaders, who do you want to meet? Who is somebody that with whom you have a common interest or with whom you might have a common interest? Another type of leaders, number 5, is religious leaders. Boy, if you want to connect to people, connect with people that people connect with. And so whether it's your church, your synagogue, the cathedral, who are the religious leaders around you on different levels? Be intentional about making connections with those who lead in the religious area. And now number 6 are educational leaders. Think about schools, colleges, universities, technical or vocational campuses, and so forth. Educational leaders. Do you know the members of the school board in your community? Do you know the members at the state level in education? Great example of leaders in a whole other realm that oftentimes will reach beyond the first 5 categories that we've listed. Area number 7 is healthcare. Who leads the clinics, the medical center or hospital, the hospital system? Again, another key area of leaders. And then finally, philanthropy. When you think about philanthropic leaders in your world, your community, your state, your region, your nation, what names come to mind? Now, these are all types of leaders, so when we think about digging a well before we need water, the point I want to make is look for ways to intentionally make connections with these types of leaders. There will be a time when you're going to want to call on them for one reason or another, and if you have already dug that well, you have, if you would, a platform on which to build your relationship. Now, I don't know if Cynthia, I don't remember if she mentioned this earlier, but if you have questions, please feel free to type them into the chat box, and from time to time she'll raise questions that you've shared or perhaps questions of her own that she would like to raise. And please don't feel like you have to wait until we get to the question and answer time. I'd love to respond to questions that you may have at any point along the way. Now, with that, what I'd like to do is now to go to the key point. I've been so excited anticipating this. The question is, how can I connect with leaders? That's the big question. That's an example of digging the well before we need water. How can I do that? Now that we know why and when and who, we come to the question of how. And so if you're on your, if you have the handouts in front of you, I'm on page 4. And here's 6 ways that you can connect with anyone. Do I mean anyone? Yes, anyone. And whether it's those who are in the categories that we shared earlier, or whether it's people that are entirely outside of that. 6 ways that you can connect with anybody. Number 1 is to join. I'm going to share one example. Join a civic club. There are other organizations, membership organizations, that you could consider joining, but I will tell you, as I look back and ask myself, uh, of the many advantages that I enjoy in my life right now, what can I point to that was most pivotal? And as much as I would like to say that it's my alma mater, my local church, any number of other membership organizations, I have to tell you that for me, it was a very important day back in the mid 80s, early 80s, I guess. I'm dating myself, aren't I? But at that time, I joined the Optimist Club. Now, Lord knows I needed optimism, and I needed the friendship and the association that came from a club. But here's the number one thing for me about a civic club is it allowed me to connect with people that I had absolutely no connection with otherwise, and no hope that I would connect with them. A real key opportunity. So whether it's a civic club or other membership organization, join. It will open avenues through which you'll make connections that you wouldn't be able to find otherwise. And here's number two. Tell people thank you. Now that may seem like a silly way that you can connect, but people like to be appreciated. And so many times, and again, I'm just going to share my own experience, it's easy for me to think, somebody else is thanking those who are making investments in my company, in my community, personally in my life, in my church. I mean, fill in the blank. There are always people whose efforts are appreciated, and we think, well, somebody else is thanking them. I just want to say to you that it became very valuable in my life when I would go out of my way and just say thank you to someone. It might be in person. Um, Thank you for serving as mayor in my community. Um, Thank you for the privilege of working alongside you. Thank you for leading our professional organization. Thank you for your generous contribution to our community. I mean, there's really no limit to the excuses, the reasons, if you would, that we can tell others thank you. But by simply saying thank you, it often gives us an opportunity to move from the realm of unknown to known. Who do you want to know? Is there a sincere reason that you could thank that person? Number three, convene gatherings. And again, I'm going to just relate this back to my own experience at what is now Oklahoma Wesleyan University, or many of the clients that I serve. People say, well, nobody knows us. Nobody knows our organization. So I immediately raised the question, well, how would they, and how would we be known? What would we be known for? Um, and a lot of times we look in the mirror and kind of scratch our head. Well, how would somebody know us? Why would they know us? We're quietly, very quietly going about doing our work, doing good in our communities, and the reason nobody knows is because we haven't told them. And so one of the things that we can do is convene gatherings. I was working with a client several years ago, again, in an unknown organization. They were brand new, and frankly, their area of operation geographically was in a forgotten part of the community. Nobody knew them. Nobody had reason to know them. Well, one of the things we did is we said we're going to convene a gathering for the purpose of addressing social issues in our community. And somebody could say, well, who are you to do it? Well, as you know, the saying, if it is to be, it is up to me. And this is one of those ways when we can take something that otherwise is up to nobody, make it up to me, call together leaders in the community for the purpose of either addressing a problem or exploring a solution. Oftentimes those go together. Convene the gathering and invite others who are in our own space, whom we would like to be standing alongside or be seen standing next to. So convene gatherings. Number four, volunteer. And I think of maybe of all six, this may be my favorite in terms of ways to connect. When you volunteer, it gives you an opportunity, number one, to give back in ways that certainly are deserved, and secondly, it gives you ways to connect with people whom otherwise you might not have any connection. I will tell you that in my community and in my geographic area, I have volunteered for numerous kinds of activities, and as a result, it has connected me with people who in no way are my peers socially, politically, spiritually, educationally, economically, from a business standpoint or whatever. We are not peers by any stretch of the imagination, and yet, because I volunteered and had the opportunity to work side by side with that individual, whatever the need is, I can pick up the phone and make a call, and it will either be answered or the call will be returned. Again, as I mentioned, by people who we are not peers in any way other than we've worked side by side. And so, can you overdo this volunteering? Yes, you can. Frankly, I don't know if I've ever met anyone who has. Somebody asked me one time. They said, "Kent, why do you volunteer so much?" And I thought it was a great question, something that I really hadn't thought about that way. And so I spent some time pondering the question, and eventually I began to realize that when I volunteer, even though this isn't the motivation for it, I always gain so much more than I give. Think about that. When we volunteer, we gain more than we give. And where would we volunteer? Um, if you don't know where, pick up the newspaper, listen to the radio, watch television, check your Facebook page, and you'll see an almost unlimited number of opportunities to volunteer. And if you if going to those you don't come up with any answers, I'm just going to give you a couple of suggestions. Go to your local United Way. Go to your local community foundation, the Salvation Army, the American Red Cross, the YMCA, your local school or university, and just show up without an appointment and just say, I'm looking for a way to get involved in our community through volunteer service. How can I be of assistance? And once the person recovers from the shock of something that rarely happens, you'll immediately have an opportunity to volunteer. And again, I've had numerous occasions to do just that, and it's opened doors that I couldn't have dreamed of. Number 5, ask for advice. Ask for advice. And I just noticed on the handout, I left out the word for. It just says ask advice. Ask for advice. Really? Ways that you can connect? Let me just share, again, a very personal example of some ways that very practice has been extremely beneficial in my own life. When I was preparing to launch my business back in 2001, I decided that I wanted to get the benefit of the experience of others. People whose story I knew. They had been in a corporate environment for many years, as I had been, and then they left the safety of that and started their own company, their own business, their own firm, and had gone on to experience success. So I asked myself, can I benefit from their experience? Can I gain from the lessons that they've learned? Well, being the optimist that I am and believing that that was the case, I thought I picked a handful of people and I scheduled interviews, and I told them as I set it up, I'm getting ready to start my business. I would love to pick your brain and just pick up a couple of examples or of lessons that you've learned, advice that you may have, perhaps some warnings that you would share. And let me say that that the result of that was so much greater than I could have even imagined. Look for ways that you can ask sincerely for advice, and in the process, you will find that a relationship begins to grow almost instantaneously. A great way to connect with other people. Number 6 is to give, and I want to say give generously, not reluctantly. Well, what can I give? And you can see there on your handout, I can give money, I can give my expertise, I can give time, I can give my carefully considered thoughts. There are lots of ways that we can give, and when we do, we're digging a well. We're laying a foundation for future connections that oftentimes would otherwise go unnoticed. Now, for a long, long time, I've believed that the finest people on earth are those who do what they don't have to do. And by definition, what does that relate to? It's volunteering and donating. Again, you think about some of the most outstanding citizens in the world, in the country, in the state, in your community. You'll find what they have in common. They give of their time without compensation. That's called volunteering. And they give of their money with no expectation of return. That's philanthropic. That's a charitable donation. So here's the point that I want to make. Again, the finest people on earth are those who do what they don't have to do. I want to encourage each of us to join them. Let's become one of the finest people on earth. Let's volunteer. Let's donate. Really? What does this have to do with digging a well before you need water? Exactly that. As we volunteer, as we donate, we are storing up opportunities that will materialize at times when we never could have envisioned it. So here's a question. What would you like more help? What do you do after you get in? Well, that's a big, big part. In fact, a friend of mine, Rick Coltman, Rick, I wonder if you're even on the line, but Rick shared with me a phrase some time ago, and he correlated this to the process of seeking grants from foundations. He said your job is to get in line, stay in line, and then get to the front of the line. Well, what we've talked about today, digging a well before you need a drink, frankly, that's all about the process of getting in line, staying in line, and then getting to the front of the line. The question is, after we get to the front of the line and get in, what do we do then? And I wish we had time to explore that in depth today. However, let me just suggest as a resource, a couple of resources. One is my book. Cynthia made reference to this during her introduction, Asking About Asking. The subtitle is Mastering the Art of Conversational Fundraising. But that will give you a lot of very practical suggestions, tips, and approaches that you can employ once you get to the front of the line, once you get in, once you've taken that drink, so that you can take the next step. Another resource that I'm going to share is the Asking Academy. And again, Cynthia made reference to this earlier, but in a nutshell, the purpose of the Asking Academy is to equip leaders to dramatically transform their results. And again, we go into great, great depth of what happens after I get the appointment. What happens after I have the invitation to come to the table, if you would. And so if you're interested in more information there, you can go to conversationalfundraising.com. Now, as we wrap up, I have a big question for you. And you see it there on your screen. What is one thing that you will put to use? And let me just suggest right away, today, what is one thing that we touched on today that you could put to use? Now I want to pause here. I notice we've got just a couple of minutes, and before we go into our final wrap-up, let me just ask Cynthia, are there any questions that you would like to raise, or perhaps questions that have been registered by our attendees today?
Yes, actually, what I'd like to do is share some comments with you, Kent, and also some questions. So I'm going to take these in the order that they came. The
Okay,
first
super.
one that came through is when you were talking about 7 reasons to get in, they added that you want to get to know a person, so it might be a discovery visit. So you could add, now you have 8 reasons to get in. You said meet someone, but also get to know someone would be another
Excellent.
reason to get in, right? And I want to let you know that one of our audience attendees today is calling in from Nairobi, Kenya, if you can
Oh,
believe
wow.
that. Yeah,
Wow.
and they wish that they had been taught this in school 10 years ago. So all I can say is, well, at least there is today, and from 10 years from now, with armed with this information and put to use, you'll be in a much, and hopefully the situation of your dreams at that point. So, but I wanted to share that we are
Oh, wow.
reaching to Nairobi, Kenya today.
So I'm curious if you can, if you see the name and can share it. I'm wondering, is this Thomas or perhaps
No,
someone
it's
else?
Ollie. Ollie.
Oh, Ollie. Hey, man, thank you for tapping in, and we really need to reconnect. Man, I'm glad you're able to participate today.
Okay, and now we have the types of leaders that you were talking about, Kent. This is a question.
Yes.
Should do many of these types of leaders overlap in their respective categories, or do you see them as extremely distinct?
Great question, and it ties into a comment that I meant to make, and that is that oftentimes there is overlap there, for sure. Um, one of the reasons that I like to break it down like this is that oftentimes it will prompt us to think of additional names that we wouldn't think of if we said, who are the top 3 leaders in the community? But yeah, oftentimes somebody who is a business leader may also be a philanthropic leader, maybe playing a key role in leading in thoughts or opinions, etc.
Okay. Here's another question. How important do you believe is social media in establishing genuine relationships with boomers?
Yeah, good question. Um, here's my opinion on that, and social media is very important in our society. My experience, and keep in mind, uh, boy, should I admit this, later this month I'll turn 60. So there's a huge difference in somebody with 6 decades of life and history behind them, and somebody who may be in their 30s, 20s even. But here's my experience. I think social media, whether it's electronic, mail, Facebook, Twitter, what have you, Instagram, I think all that social media, I think is a great tool. In my experience, it's far better for sustaining a relationship than it is creating it. And so I may get an introduction through social media, and frankly, Oliver or Ollie in Nairobi is an example of that. We were connected through, I think it was actually a webinar way back when. Um, that was our introduction. We got connected though actually through a Skype session. So I think it's a great way to either sustain a relationship or to kind of scratch the surface. But as far as really having in-depth relationship, I find nothing beats the person-to-person, face-to-face, kind of one-on-one situation. So anytime you can gravitate towards that, it will grow the relationship faster, deeper, stronger, in my experience, than any combination of social media.
Great, thank you, Kent. And now we have another question. There are so many places to volunteer. Do you recommend choosing something you like or being more strategic if you want to meet certain people?
I love these questions. Um, and does it have to be either or? Um, so the first question, should it be something you like? Well, I want to respond this way. Don't volunteer for something you hate. But don't limit yourself to things that you already know that you only like. And so, for example, again, I'm going to pick on myself. My background is finance. I'm an accountant. And it's easy when I volunteer to volunteer for some aspect of, let's say, financial management or, being the treasurer of an organization, whatever. However, it has grown me more and opened up more doors for me when I have volunteered for things that are outside my natural inclination. So again, I'd say strike a balance there and look for ways to test yourself. I'm going to share a quote. I don't know where this originated, but they said if you're going to be successful in life, you have to become comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that's, to me, that sounds kind of counterintuitive. But I will tell you that my growth has occurred far more rapidly when I've pressed myself to go beyond my natural comfort, and I think others will find the same.
Okay, very good. And I have another comment. This is a bit long, so I'll take it a little bit slow. I understand that molding long term relationships takes a lot of time and attention. My question is, how do you ensure that you're not spreading yourself too thin by saying yes to most every opportunity that comes your way? Is there a strategy determining which opportunities to volunteer or ask for advice or give generously or for would be the best place for your time
Mm,
and also for building the strongest relationship? So, do you have a strategy to kind of cover that whole
yeah.
arena?
Well, that's a very good observation, and nobody can argue with that. And here's what I want to say: is if you're in a position of being stretched too thin, it probably reflects that you've been successful in this area to begin with. But I would say instead of asking the either or question, should I say yes to everything or be more strategic? Um, Look at the competing interests and go make yourself uncomfortable by getting out of the or and into the and. So how can I say yes to things that will be strategic? There may be some things that there's no amount of strategy that's going to add value to it. So to me, that's an easy no. Um, but well, I was invited to volunteer to provide some volunteer service for a board recently. It would have been very easy for me to say yes to that, to invest the time, effort, and energy in it, and not have a strategic result. Yet by taking one more step, I was able to add strategy to all of the above. And so again, I'd say get out of the or business into the and business, and press yourself, and if need be, bring somebody alongside to say, um, how can I make this strategic? Oftentimes we'll ask the question, can this be strategic? And we have a 50-50 chance of getting a no answer. But if we'll change that question by putting a how in front of it, how can this be strategic? Now our creativity goes to work, and we have a 100% chance of getting a yes, and now we have a half a chance of getting strategy along with the yes. I hope that's helpful, and would love to go into even more depth at another time, or even one-on-one.
Okay, Kent. And by the way, if you have a remaining question, we have a couple more minutes, so go ahead and type in a question, and we'll go ahead and take it. Here's one for you. It steps outside of what you're talking about, Kent. So, but I'll go ahead because there is a little bit of time. Perhaps you have a thought on this. What do we do when someone says they want to help but don't fulfill what they say they'll do? I guess these are
Oh, does
people
that
that
really
work with
happen?
volunteers.
Oh, what do we do with that person that says they want to help, and they probably do want to help, they just don't help? Um, well, first of all, let me state what may be the obvious, and it's too easy, but sometimes we just have to say thank you. I'm going to thank them for their intent. Thank you, and move on. I think too many of us and I'm including myself in this, I think too many of us spend too much time, energy, effort, and other resources trying to rescue a situation that simply can't be rescued. And again, I think once that assessment's been made, it's time to go to the next person in line. And I don't mean that unkindly. And I think there are ways that we can be respectful, preserve a person's dignity, but I so many times we find ourselves in situations. I find myself in a situation where the things that I'm being asked to do, no matter how much I want to, I simply don't have the capability. And the longer I stay in that role, the more frustrated I become, and the greater limitation I become to the organization or whatever need that I've become an obstacle to. So, again, I think sometimes we have to say, this isn't the right combination. As much as we intended for this to work, it simply isn't happening. Let's try something different.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kent. And I believe with that, other than, oh no, here's another one coming in. Um, okay. We have some comments from Ollie who says, awesome, and sends his regards to you and a thank you
Oh,
for this
sweet.
webinar. And we have another, in fact, we have multiple thank yous coming in, Kent, for the talk today. Now, here's another one. How do I get better about asking for advice?
Hmm. Um, you know
Sounds
that
like she
that's a
just got better.
good observation. Yeah. Well, so that's a good
Just
place.
ask.
Number one, do it. Yeah. The the two things that I'd say have been most transformational for me in that very area. Number one is, as you observed, do it. Ask for advice, and again, it's kind of pushing ourselves beyond that comfort level. So how can we do so more effectively? The number one best recommendation that I can give is, before asking for advice, be very deliberate in writing out the question that you want advice about. And so what that does is it allows us to tweak our question until we are laser focused on how we can ask the question in a way that will be meaningful. And I'm going to give you an example. This was an advice visit that I conducted with a corporate giant, someone who I had met one time before, and he had no reason to give me the time of day. But um, here was my question, and I scheduled lunch. I wanted to buy this guy lunch, and I said, I've observed that you're very successful in your business and in your family. What advice would you have? What are a couple of tips that you could share that contribute so much to that success? Now, that may seem like kind of a simple or dumb question, but for me, I mean, I really had to work on that to boil